I'm pleased to welcome Freyja Haraldsdóttir to the spotlight. Freyja has a bachelor degree in social pedagogy, a postgraduate diploma in equality studies, and is currently an MA student in gender studies at the University of Iceland. Freyja has been in a leading role as a disability activist for 10 years, but the years 2010 to 14, she was a managing directress in the Independent Living Center in Iceland. Freyja is going to discuss multiple oppression and disabled women's fight for civil rights. Welcome, Freyja.
Thank you. You must be tired, he said, as he stood there with his hair all messed up, his tie was loose, and his shirt was wrinkled. In his face, I could read a mixture of pity and amazement. It was my first week as a vice parliamentarian in 2013, and it was the last day before the closing of Parliament over the summertime. We had been working from 9 o'clock in the morning, and now the time was 1:30 in the next morning. I hadn't managed to go to the bathroom the whole day, since it takes me a lot of time, and I had many speeches to make, so I always had to be ready to go into the chamber. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, I asked the secretary to move one of my speeches to later so I could go to the bathroom. I didn't discuss this with anyone, because I felt if I did, I would be living the stereotype of the tired, weak, disabled woman, and because I constantly felt I had to prove myself. I was getting a lot of comments about being a brave hero and felt by what some people said to me that they were surprised that I was intelligent enough to be in Parliament. Some people also talked to me like I was a child. It either annoyed me or made me laugh each time, but still I seemed to internalize this mixture of messages, as well as taking with me a long history of stigma that I have internalized through the years. I didn't know what to say to him, and I wondered whether he was saying this to me because I was disabled, a woman, or both. This was the third time this week that a male parliamentarian asked me if I wasn't tired. This job, even though it's challenging, was not at all as draining as being an activist. It is also a job I enjoy when I step in, working with a lot of people, offers something new to learn every day, and is often very fast. A job where I really feel I can use my education and personal and political experience to make a difference in our society for the people who put all their trust on us as their representatives in politics. But of course I was tired. I was tired from the job and of answering stupid questions like this one. I feel just as tired as you look, I finally said accidentally. He laughed and walked away embarrassed. Even though these incidents present the ableism and sexism I have experienced as a disabled woman politician, I believe it is important for me also to acknowledge my privileges. I was born into a family that from day one fought hard for my rights because they saw me as a human being. I went to regular schools and was never institutionalized. I'm also a white, straight, cisgender woman labeled with physical impairment and have had personal assistance for 8 years now. This has given me opportunities to work on the open labor market and to study in universities both here in Iceland and in England. I have participated in activism of some sort for the last 10 years, where I have met many of other disability activists that are in a leading role globally. I learned about disability studies and gender studies early and got to know feminism, and most recently Black feminism, which has in many ways been my survival kit the last couple of years as a feminist disability activist. Through activism around independent living for disabled people, I got to know Guðmundur Steingrímsson, who was then, among other people, starting a political party called Bright Future, which I'm a part of today. I'm not talking about this to degrade the oppression I experience on the grounds of disability and gender every single day. I'm mentioning this because many disabled people, especially women, have not had these opportunities because of exclusion and lack of opportunities for education, working, and so on. I also think it's important to mention this because Iceland tends to brag a lot about itself. Well, at least ministers and people in power. We like to present ourselves as some kind of paradise when it comes to welfare issues, human rights, gender equality, and celebration of queer people. And then they use the few examples, like my political participation, to justify that everything is fine. Even though role models are important for everyone, especially underrepresented groups, the problem with them is that they are sometimes the exception, not the norm. And most people don't realize what they've gone through to get there or where they come from. Iceland can, of course, be proud of many things, and should be, but you can't look away from the fact that when research is done and data is gathered, for example, for the gender gap Jane was talking about earlier, disabled women and other marginalized women are seldom given an opportunity to participate and don't have a seat at the table, so the rankings are biased. Men cannot properly tell women's stories, just like non-disabled women cannot tell the stories of disabled women properly. Going into politics was not an easy step to take. I had learned from many spaces in society that my opinion did not matter, that my demands were unrealistic and even terrorist, that my body was something I should hide and feel ashamed of. And politics are all about being visible and having opinions. As an activist, I was afraid that politics would impact that role negatively, and I'm still confused sometimes whether I should take the activist to the parliament or leave it at home. But obviously the activist is too bossy to be left at home and gets really frustrated when I cry. I was also afraid to be one of the very few disabled women in a position of power, because even though I have brilliant co-members in my political party and colleagues elsewhere in politics, sometimes it feels very lonely to be there. One of the reasons I believe is that my background is so much different than many others there, and my background obviously shapes my opinions and views. It's not only my background per se, but the groups I identify with. Disabled people around the globe have a history of being oppressed, excluded, and stigmatized. Disabled women are exposed to multiple systems of oppression on the grounds of disability and gender, and possibly other factors. Diverse research shows that often disabled women lack resources, appropriate services, and access, and are exposed to a great amount of stigma and violence concerning their bodies, independence, sexuality, and humanity. That easily deprives us of opportunities to control our lives, participate in society, work or study, and be mobile. Various research has shown that oppression affects disabled women more than non-disabled women and disabled men. Iceland is far behind when it comes to disability rights. We have not ratified the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, even though we signed it 8 years ago. Only a small portion of disabled people have user-led personal assistance. Most people live in segregated housing or are dependent on their families. This particular issue, of course, limits opportunities for disabled people to gain education, work, do activism, live independently, participate in politics, and influence its society. A report from 2013 by Anna Lawson, a professor of law in the University of Leeds, titled Access to and Accessibility of Citizenship and Political Participation of People with Disabilities in Europe, suggests that Iceland lacks legal framework, policy, knowledge, and good practices related to political participation of disabled people. You can vote, but often the material or information is inaccessible. You can choose who assists you with voting, but only if you express yourself as the Voting Act states clearly. I'm not sure what clearly means. I don't understand how that changes your political opinions, and I would think choosing your own assistants would be especially important for this group of disabled people. You can run for parliament, but the parliament building is very inaccessible. You can run for elections, but you can't count on good access everywhere you need to go, even in places you think you would be safe, like in events for women in politics or in your own political party. This is clearly something that we need to change. We not only need to ratify the convention, but also put in practice our obligations. It's important to focus on women and be aware that to access political rights, you have to have social rights. It's important to discuss this while we celebrate the 100 years have passed since women got their voting rights. The thing is, only some women got their voting rights. For that reason, many disabled women, including myself, don't relate to this celebration strongly. Because many of us still don't have these rights in reality. And it's not just a disability issue. It's a gender issue too. We have to work towards gender equality by intersecting different systems of oppression and seeing how they influence each other and overlap. That is the responsibility of the international level, the EU level, the Icelandic government, local authorities, academia, and social movements. A friend of mine told me recently that a woman active in the feminist movement had complained about disabled women not understanding that ableism and sexism were separate issues to tackle in different spaces. I was speechless. Disabled women cannot pull themselves apart and pretend that sometimes they're only women and sometimes they're only disabled. Just to fit some structure of disability or feminist movements that somebody else, lacking our experience, made. As a feminist disability activist, I soon realized that I could not only fight for a part of my group and leave someone out, for example, women with intellectual impairments. Because we are not we and them, we are us together. We are far from being all the same, but we share the experience of being marginalized and excluded in a way that makes every step towards power over our bodies and lives a hard one. As Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, an American scholar in the field of critical race theory and a professor, said, when we don't pay attention to the margins, when we don't acknowledge that intersection where the places of power overlap, we not only fail to see the women who fall between our movements, sometimes we pit our movements against each other. I know it's not always going to be easy, and we're going to have difficult discussions. But it's not going to be harder than all of us being more or less powerless. Would still be the case if we approach gender equality as a single issue struggle. We need each other, not only to demand space and power, but to take it. Nobody is going to give it to us. I, like Audre Lorde, a black queer feminist activist with a visual impairment, believe that we can best do that by admitting, respecting, and celebrating that women, as she phrased it, don't live single-issue lives. Thank you.